So I just got some new books, right? And I wanted to show them. It has a lot to do with the American founding, which I think is important, and especially for the American soul, right? Its Christian heritage. I did recommend other books in my other videos, so you can look at those. Um, so I just wanted to show off these. So this one, I just got it today. It's came out recently, it's been out less than a month. So it's called, this one. It's called The Classical and Christian Origins of American Politics, Political Theology, Natural Law, and the American Founding. It's by Cody W. Cooper and Justin Buckley Dyer. So I thought it dealt with a lot of the important things about our ethos, right? Our paradigm, our American reality, how it's tied to the scriptures. Like here, I'll just read this part. It says, The Classical and Christian Origins of American Politics. There has been a considerable amount of literature in the last 70 years claiming that the American founders were steeped in modern thought. This study runs counter to that tradition, arguing that the founders of America were deeply indebted to the classical Christian natural law tradition for their fundamental theological, moral, and political outlook. Evidence for this thesis is found in the case studies of such leading American founders as Thomas Jefferson and James Wilson. The pamphlet debates the founders' invocation of providence during the Revolution and their understanding of popular sovereignty. The authors go on to reflect on how the founders' political thought contained within it the resources that undermined in principle the institution of slavery, and explores the relevance of the founders' political theology for contemporary politics. This timely important book makes a significant contribution to the scholarly debate over whether the American founding is compatible with traditional Christianity. So it touches up on those kind of subject, that subject I'm talking about. It goes into like introduction, classical and Christian origins, and then the other chapters, God and Nature's Law and the pamphlet debates, Thomas Jefferson, Nature's God, and the theological foundations of natural rights, republicanism, reason, revelation, and revolution, providence and natural law, and the war for independence, reason, will, and popular sovereignty, the law of nature, and James Wilson's lectures on law, and conclusion, classical Christian natural law, and the American political order. Because I think it's important that the Christian heritage is important to the civic and social ethos or order of the country. So I like books like this, so I pick them up. I learn more about that. And then this book, the other one, this one, called Secularism and the American Republic, Revisiting Thomas Jefferson on Church and State by Leroy Forlines. I've already read it. It came out like 2 weeks ago or so. So it hasn't been out for that long. And it did a pretty good job. It kind of went over the history of the term secularism, and terms like that, like secularists. Kind of proves that, basically it proves that the American founders were not secularists, and they should not be seen as strict secularists, strict theists, or strict separationist, right? And so it does a pretty good job. Then it has the appendix, like 3 different things, 3 different appendices or so. Basically proving that they don't have a secularist ethos, how they keep interpreting the founders in that light. So it is really nothing more than a distortion. It goes over the history of secularism, the timeline, reviews the First Amendment, reviews some of these court cases like Everson and McCollum and stuff like that. So definitely will recommend this book. This one is Natural Law and the Anti-Slavery Constitutional Tradition by Justin Dyer. Looks like that. And it kind of touches up on the constitutional tradition. I haven't read it yet. It goes over like slavery and the contradictions of the American founding. So it deals with those issues, and the rights of nature and stuff like that. So I haven't read it yet, but it touches up on like a similar theme. And this one's the same author, Justin Dyer. Slavery, Abortion, and the Politics of Constitutional Meaning. Right, because that's a big deal today. So I bought some books on it. From Francis Beckwith. It says, I cannot think of another scholarly book that addresses the abortion slavery analogy in such a comprehensive manner. Professor Dyer skillfully ties the rhetorical use of the slavery analogy and the abortion debate to the substantive, philosophical, and legal questions on which the debates over slavery and abortion hinge. This analysis of the conceptual parallels between the pro-life and the anti-slavery movements is fascinating. Sometimes the best way to understand one's present situation is to look for analogous cases everywhere or elsewhere, either in the past or in the present, about which there seems to be clarity. Let me see. This one, it's called Christopher Dawson, Progress in Religion, an Historical Inquiry. With a foreword by Kristen Scott and introduction by Mary Douglas. Looks like this. Yeah, it deals with like the history of progressivism. And like in the back kind of touched up on that idea as well. Like how the religious heritage of the country, basically the Christian one, is an important one to this country. Like, what did it say? It says like Progress in Religion, in the back it says, was perhaps the most influential of all Christopher Dawson's books, establishing him as an interpreter of history and a historian of ideas. It has been described as a brilliant work of synthesis, for in this single volume he outlines his main thesis for the history of culture, which was his life's work. Anthropology, sociology, philosophy, religion, and history form the backdrop for the key idea of his thought, namely that religion is the soul of a culture and that a society or a culture which has lost its spiritual roots is a dying culture. To Dawson, a return to the Christian culture that had formed Western civilization was the only remedy for a world adrift. Dawson was writing in the period between the two great wars of the 20th century, a time when some thought that the idea of progress had finally been discredited by the carnage and barbarianism of the First World War. Progress in Religion was clearly intended to challenge the doctrine of progress, the rather naive but persistent belief that in every day and in every way the world grows better and better. And so Dawson argued that Western civilization was at a turning point and confronted with two real choices: reappropriate a vital Christian culture or move increasingly towards more dangerous and alienated expressions of consumerism and totalitarianism. In Progress in Religion, he contends that no culture could truly thrive if it cut off from its religious roots. So that's why I say the importance of like this vision, right, of what I speak of, like the American New Covenant Nation, or it's American, like the way it was called, the American Israel, right? I think that is important. Not so much the strict Protestantism, like maybe the liberty of conscience, right? Because I'm trying to conserve that. I don't think Protestant theocracy works. You see it in history, right? It kind of has like a lot of problems. And so it's not that I'm trying to conserve that. I'm trying to conserve that new covenant mind and spirit of what their founders kept in the Republic, before the Republic, right? And this one is from Vincent Philip Munoz. I read this book already. It's pretty good. It's called God and the Founders, Madison, Washington, and Jefferson. And he just talks about, it goes over the choices of it goes over the differences of opinion or disagreements on the wall of separation, or so to say, or where to put the wall. Like goes over Madison's view, like Madison's principle of state non-cognizance of religion, and George Washington on church, state, religion, and civic good. Like he feels that, religious, like it was more like an ecumenical. Washington was more like, the idea that I got was like Washington was more for like a type of ecumenism between the Christian sects for the sake of the civic order, right? Because it serves a civic purpose. And James Madison, was about non-cognizance, because like the national government really can't say anything because it's like about religion or something like that. That because of the, if I understood it correctly, a social compact / natural rights presupposition. That's what the author argues for, like that is outside the jurisdiction of the government. I guess because the idea is the right to worship God comes from God or something, and not is part of the natural rights and social compact or something. Or if I read that correctly, like basically that it's outside the national government's jurisdiction. So it wasn't for like godlessness or anything. And it talks about Thomas Jefferson's natural rights philosophy and anti-clerical politics of religious liberty, sort of saying. So it's a pretty good book, showing their disagreements on like where to put the wall. And like I said before, like to me the wall is like secularists interpret that as the foundation, but no, the wall is something that stands on the foundation, and the foundation is a religious one. That presuppose like its religious nature is the Christian one. And let me see, like this one I'm still reading. I'm still reading this one because I finished the new book about Jefferson, separation of church and state, and so I'm moving to this one to try to finish this one. Yeah, I filled this one off before, and I finished this one. Religious liberty and the American founding, natural rights and the original meanings of the First Amendment, religious clauses. It's by the Vincent Philip Munoz. Like he doesn't argue for accommodation, like the one from, the book that I read recently, the Jefferson one on separation of church and state. I think that author he argues for accommodation, right, of religion. But this one he kind of argues like a little bit against that and against strict separation. Like he seems to have his own position on it that presupposes like what it says, a natural rights interpretation or so, presupposing the social compact of Madison. So it was a good book. It was kind of technical, but he seems to like have an interesting position. So if you're interested in it, you can pick up this book. And then I think I showed you this one. I read this one. It's really good too. The Forgotten Features of the Founding has like all the religious themes of the early republic by James Hudson. Basically describes like what was it that I saw? Yeah, they're showing you that that Jefferson like it seemed like he cared more for the civic order of the Christians, or so to say, than a theistic one or secular one. Because it seemed like they counted themselves as Christian men, right? Not so much deism, not so much deists, like they seem to count themselves as Christians, how they contributed and committed to that order, that religious order, right? Like they don't actually give you a secularist order. Yeah, like in this book it talked about the Nursing Fathers tradition, the model of church-state relations in America, like before Jefferson, right? But actually Jefferson was more consistent with that tradition than separationist, right? So this one was pretty good. Just on those issues. And what other one? This one I've read. I think The Separation of Church and State by Philip Hamburger. I've shown this book off before. Basically argues against the idea of separation, that it didn't come from the Christians, right? And that is not what, like when they use terms like secular, or maybe they alluded to something like separation, that is not really what they were arguing for, because separation is associated with secularization or godlessness, right? A religion. And that's not at all what any of the Christians argued for, like the dissenters, that they were accused of that by the Congregationalists or the established, churches of the states were accusing them of wanting godlessness just because they wanted the right to worship God, and how it proves that like this establishment was not really for secularization, right? It's really for the idea or the right to worship God, right? And it was really more like the religious liberty of the right to worship God was more of the natural right. That was the one that the Christians wanted. Like even the Unitarians and all the other ones, like they wanted that. Like that's what they wanted. that when they spoke of like a secular element, right, it doesn't mean the same thing like secularist or secularism, right? Like the other book was going over, the one on separation of church and state, the one I recently read. And so this one kind of like goes over the idea of separation, how it's not really like like the other books say, it's not really the founding definition of the natural rights. Like it's really the natural right is the right to worship God according to the dictates of conscience. And like I would say that like it does go over, like these books do go over like true religion, because the rights according to conscience, right, it makes it sound like it's subjective or something, but it's really not. Like it like I look at it like the social order, right? Like the consciousness has a sacred order. Like there are things you should abstain from in your mind, right? Like you have to like your mind functions a certain way, just like society should function a certain way. So like liberty and consciousness, it comes from God, and so it still presupposes correct worship, right? And like even if it's like that's why I say, because I know some, like it does deal with the um, I think the other book, right? This one goes over the objections, just like the other book on the separation of church and state. That the recent book from about Jefferson, right? I think they do touch on the idea like that not all like it doesn't how should I say, justify like immoral worship, like child sacrifice or something. Like they do address those things, and so it cannot possibly presuppose anyone's definition of religion. Like true religion comes from God, is based on eternal principles, not on what you make up, what you call religion, right? And then I think this one, I showed this one off before, this thick one. It's the Christian Life and Character of the Civil Institutions of the United States by Benjamin Morris, right? This is a re-release of this old book. Gary DeMar, president of American Vision, right? He republished it. It's got a nicer cover and stuff. Like, so it has a lot of interesting ideas. Like it goes over all these things, like Christian women and the revolution, and Washington, a Christian hero, a Christian statesman, a Christian politician, a Christian magistrate. This is a pretty thick book. I'm pretty sure I showed this before. Just thought like it complements the other stuff that I'm saying. The Government of Laws. I'm reading this one as well. Left off on this part. This is a reflection on the spiritual aspects of the American founding. How it haven't finished it. And yeah, it's basically, it says like a government of laws is a political theory, religion, and the American founding. It says in a government of laws, which includes a new preface. Ilis Sandos reevaluates the traditional understanding of the philosophic and intellectual background of the American founding, which basically goes over how like they favored more of a Christian religious order, right? It's spiritual, its soul is grounded in, like, of the country is tied to that. Yeah, it goes over the against the secularist foundation, that idea. Because I just, like I said, it's nothing more than a distortion. And it's like, I don't know, I think it's important, right, that you argue for the right understanding of your foundation, not be standing on someone else's foundation that is nothing but a distortion. And so that's why I recommend like books like these. And this one, I think this one was like a recent book that came out as well. It's called Defending the Republic, Constitutional Morality in a Time of Crisis. I think it's a reprint. I don't know. Like, this is Essays in Honor of George W. Carey. I think it might touch up on some of the things. I don't know. Like, I thought it was interesting. It goes over constitutional morality. So, yeah, it's a republication. Like here it says, H. Lee Cheek Jr. The guy says, quote, "The republication of this volume is a cause for celebration. Amidst the continued attempts to devalue and misinterpret the American political tradition, often for ideological reasons, stands the life and work of George Westcott Carey, whose gentle spirit and brilliant insights into the American political life offer much hope for recovery on so many fronts. The scholarship of the talented scholars in this book who were trained by Carey and the tradition of interpretation he fostered, and who also possess Carey's the devotion to a moral republic, deserve the attention of all scholars of American politics, American history, and political thought. So I thought it looked pretty interesting, so I bought it. And it's a reprint, and talks about the other different essays, like religious pluralism and the American experiment. From Articles of Peace to Culture Wars, and what else? The Rule of Man, how caring too much about important things is destroying constitutional law, the crisis of the American political tradition. So I thought it was interesting, so I picked it up. And if you find it interesting, you can pick it up too as well. This one, I show this one off. America Transformed, The Rise and Legacy of American Progressivism by Ronald Prestito. Looks like that. I think I showed this one off, but it just deals with the problems of progressivism. And to me, because I see the country progressing in error. And so it's like, I just feel that's something that needs to be repented of as a country, to repent of our progressive errors. So that's why I picked a book on that. And then this one is The Excellence of the Common Law by Brent Allen Winters. I thought it looked interesting. It just goes over like the common law tradition and in America and stuff, like civil law, origin and growth. So there's a ton of chapters, kind of a little like a thick book, like over 400 pages, about 400 pages or so. Yeah, America, like it says, common law reveals America's character, common law versus civil law, introductory contrast. Talks about Babylon, like also deals with biblical things, like Babylon conceived in civil law, and then Nimrod and Babylon settlement, Nimrod and civil law, sons of the sun, the Tower of Babel, first ziggurat, Rome, Babylon's early influence, what else? Moloch worship, emperor worship, things like that. Goes over pre-Anglo-Saxon Britain, the Anglo-Saxons arrive in Britain, and then common law, the American colonies and stuff, and just want to know more about common law and stuff, so that's why I picked that one up. And I think I showed this one off, I'm not sure. Divine Covenants and Moral Order, Biblical Theology of Natural Law by David Van Drunen. It's a Reformed Christian book. Let me see. Like William Brown, he says that David Van Drunen has successfully carved out a central place within the Reformed tradition for natural law and revelation. What makes his study so important is his facility in marshalling the rich variety of scripture from Genesis to Romans to prove his case. Theologically profound and exegetically announced, Van Drunen's study is essentially a biblical theology of covenant, and any subsequent study will have to reckon with this major work. So I definitely wanted to know more about like Divine Covenants and Moral Order. And then this one's just the idea of natural rights. Like I think I showed this one by Brian Tierney. And just deals with the idea of natural rights, like it says, and goes through the Christian one and its history. And I read some of it. I feel like it was important because I see a lot of like, I feel like it's being misused, right? They use natural rights to argue for all sorts of things. Like I don't think it reflects the natural rights idea, at least the classical one. And so I just pick up this book to see what, like, how to compare them, right? How it's being used today and stuff. So that's pretty much all the books I wanted to show. So if you like any of them, you know, I hope there are some that interest you. And that's about it. So anyway, if you like my videos, please like and subscribe. Thank you and God bless.